The wind whipped across the bluff, rattling the dry, dead grass, as Lyra lay prone, her rifle braced against the ground. Through the scratched-up scope of the stolen Black Dawn rifle, she watched the rift flicker shut behind Draven's captain. The bastard looked exactly the same. Arrogant, confident, utterly oblivious. He carried himself like he owned this place, like he was untouchable. A smugness in his step, a total lack of urgency. He wasn't even glancing over his shoulder. No scouting, no paranoia, no idea what was about to hit him. Idiot. Behind him, shackled, stumbling, and looking utterly defeated. Argoz. Lyra almost didn't recognize her at first. The celestial gem was dead, the glow completely gone. The disguise was gone too. No more human form, just a goblin, smaller than she remembered, more fragile somehow. The wild defiance Argoz always carried with her was slipping, her shoulders hunched forward, her head low. She wasn't fighting back. She was done. Lyra adjusted her grip on the rifle, inhaled slow. The Black Dawn rifles were junk, not made for precision, not made for grace. But at 20 yards away, she wouldn't need precision. One shot to take him down, a second to make him suffer. She lined up the shot, exhaled, and pulled the trigger. Crack! The energy blast slammed into the back of the captain's left leg, sending him sprawling into the dirt. The paralysis effect kicked in instantly. He let out a strangled yell, arms flailing as his limbs locked up. Shock twisted across his face, confusion snapping to panic as he hit the ground hard. Lyra stepped from the shadows, rifle slung lazily over her shoulder. She smirked. Damn, I was aiming for your head. Before he could even register what was happening. Crack! A second shot to the other leg. The scream that tore from his throat made Lyra grin. He couldn't move, couldn't fight back. Just lay there in the dirt like the pathetic piece of trash he was. Argoz, still standing frozen beside him, stared in open shock. Her mouth parted slightly, but no words came out. Lyra tilted her head, glancing at her. Huh. Didn't expect to see me, huh? Argoz blinked, still processing. Her lips moved silently before she finally managed to whisper, How the hell are you alive? Lyra only smirked, kneeling beside the captain, gripping a fistful of his hair and yanking his head up. His eyes burned with fury as he met hers, recognition and rage clashing violently. You! He spat. She leaned in close, voice a low, amused whisper. Miss me? His body twitched, trying to move, but the paralysis had him locked in place. She sighed dramatically. You know, you really should have checked under the rubble after the portal explosion. Would have saved you a lot of trouble. His breathing was sharp and erratic now, his fury tangible, but Lyra had zero interest in letting him off easy. She planted her boot on his chest, leaning all her weight into it, making sure he felt every bit of his humiliation. She turned her head to Argoz. So, tell me, was Rose upset about my death? Argoz, still reeling, still wide-eyed, barely shook her head. Lyra sighed, as if disappointed. Yeah, probably not. She let her boot press just a little harder into the captain's ribs before finally stepping off. Then she reached down, yanked his communicator from his belt, and flicked it on. The signal was weak, but clear enough. She smirked, then spoke directly into it. Hey, Draven, you might want to send a cleanup crew. Your boy's having a rough day. The communicator crackled violently, a garbled voice responding with sharp demands, but Lyra didn't bother listening. She tossed it onto the captain's chest, watching with satisfaction as his eyes widened in pure rage. Nothing he could do, nothing he could say. He'd lost. Again. Lyra grinned as she grabbed Argoz's wrist, tugging her forward. You coming or what? They moved quickly through the trees, but Lyra could feel Argoz hesitating behind her. After a few minutes, Argoz finally stopped walking altogether. Lyra huffed, rolling her eyes as she turned back. What now? I can't keep running. Her voice was quiet. Lyra's smirk faded. This is all because of me, Argoz continued, shaking her head. If I just turn myself in, maybe it'll stop. Maybe... Lyra cut her off. Are you actually this stupid? Argos's head snapped up, eyes narrowing. Excuse me? You think Draven wants you? You think if you hand yourself over, all of this just goes away? Lyra took a step closer, eyes locked onto hers. Let me make something real clear. Draven doesn't give a damn about you. He wants your gem. That's it. Argos's expression faltered, but Lyra wasn't done. I've been watching, I've been listening. You know what I found? The Black Dawn has a research facility up north. It's where they're making those troopers and weapons. She stepped closer, voice sharp, deadly. But there's a problem. They're out of Voidstone. And guess what? She tapped Argos's chest, right where the gem used to glow. The only way they get more is through you. Argoz stiffened. You surrender and Draven wins. You want to be responsible for that? Silence. For the first time since she'd rescued her, Argoz truly looked shaken. Lyra smirked, giving her a light shove forward. Come on, Goblin, we've got work to do. Argoz groaned. I really hate that I owe you. Lyra laughed. Good. That makes us even. The distant echo of gunfire faded into the thick murk dust air as Lyra and Argoz pushed forward, deeper into the gnarled wilderness. The trees stood like twisted sentinels around them, gnarled branches reaching for the sky, their blackened bark reflecting the damage of past battles. But Lyra wasn't thinking about the landscape. She was thinking about the patrols, because they were closing in. Footsteps crashed through the underbrush behind them, voices barking orders. Lyra caught glimpses of torchlight weaving between the trunks, scattered shouts in Black Dawn dialect snapping through the trees. Fan out! Find them! She grabbed Argoz's arm, forcing them both down into a crouch behind a moss-covered rock. Stay low. Move when I move, Lyra whispered. Argoz shot her a glare. I know how to sneak through my own damn homeland, thanks. Lyra snorted. Oh, yeah? You were doing great in shackles back there. Argoz muttered something sharp in Goblin under her breath, but Lyra ignored her, already pulling the lockpicks from her belt. A few quick twists, a soft click, then the shackles dropped away, landing in the dirt with a dull clink. Argoz rubbed her wrists, flexing her fingers. Much better. Lyra smirked. Great! Now try not to get caught again. A shout rang out behind them too close. Boots thudded against the earth and torchlights swept toward their hiding spot. Lyra clenched her jaw. Time to move. They wove through the trees like ghosts, ducking between the thick roots of fallen trees, pressing against the darkened bark whenever they heard the crunch of footsteps too near. The patrols were fast but sloppy, grunts more accustomed to kicking indoors than actual tracking. But she wasn't alone now. She stole a glance at Argoz. The goblin was quicker without the shackles, slipping through the undergrowth with practiced ease. Her steps were quiet, movements sharp. Despite everything, despite how much time she had spent away from Murkdust, Argoz still knew this land better than anyone. Lyra tapped her shoulder, motioning ahead. Argoz hesitated. Lyra arched a brow. You want to get caught, or you want to be useful? A scowl crossed Argoz's face. Without another word, she adjusted course, weaving through a narrow game trail Lyra hadn't even noticed. Lyra smirked. Now they were getting somewhere. They moved fast, the shouts of the patrols fading behind them as Argoz led them through twisting half-forgotten paths. An hour passed, the sky shifting to an eerie shade of grey as the murk dust canopy choked out the light. Argoz finally slowed, coming to a stop near a thick hollowed-out tree. She rested a hand on its bark, breathing heavy. Lyra crossed her arms. Where are we going? Argoz hesitated, glancing at the surrounding trees. There's a place, an old safe house. I haven't used it in years, but I hope Draven never found it. Lyra arched a brow. And where exactly is this secret hideout? Argoz exhaled sharply, dragging a hand over her face. North. Lyra went still. North, she repeated. A slow grin spread across Lyra's face. Wouldn't happen to be anywhere near the old North Watch Fortress, would it? Argoz groaned, rubbing her temples. You have got to be kidding me. Lyra laughed, slinging her rifle over her shoulder. What can I say? Fate's a bitch. The night stretched over them like a smothering cloak, the thick murk-dust canopy choking out the last remnants of light. Lyra adjusted her grip on the rifle slung over her shoulder, trailing just behind Argoz as they moved through the overgrown paths. The patrols had fallen away, their voices lost to the deep, endless sprawl of the wilds, but Lyra didn't let herself relax. She never relaxed. Ahead, Argoz moved with purpose. She wasn't as fast as Lyra, too much time spent running instead of fighting, but she knew this land. The goblin cut through the dense thickets like a blade through cloth, finding paths no one else would think to look for. Lyra fell in beside her, stepping where she stepped. Where exactly is this safe house? She muttered. Argoz didn't look at her, eyes scanning the terrain ahead. About half a mile. Shouldn't be more than 20 minutes at this pace. Lyra glanced at the sky, or where the sky should have been, nothing but a wall of twisting black branches. No stars. No moon. It was like being swallowed whole. She rolled her shoulders. And you're sure it's still stocked? Argoz let out a sharp breath, irritation laced in every syllable. I don't leave things behind unless I have to. There should be food, weapons, supplies, unless Draven found it. Lyra snorted. Yeah, 'cause he's real good at finding things. Lyra smirked. Relax, Goblin. I'll do the shooting. You just focus on not getting lost. Argoz ignored her, picking up the pace. The forest shifted around them, darker, heavier. The deeper they went, the more Lyra could feel the weight of this place pressing against her chest. She didn't like it. It felt watched. They reached a craggy rock formation, half hidden by overgrown vines and thick tree roots. Argoz moved to the side, fingers brushing against the stone, feeling along the grooves, pulling away a few of the vines, revealing an old wooden door hidden beneath the overgrowth. She pressed her palm against it, muttering something under her breath. A faint clicking sound followed, then the door creaked open. They stepped inside. The safe house was smaller than Lyra expected. A single room carved into the rock, reinforced with old metal scraps and beams scavenged from the ruins. A few shelves lined the walls, dust-covered but still stocked with supplies. A table sat in the centre with a worn-out cot against the far corner. Argoz pulled out a canteen and took a long drink before handing one to Lyra. Not bad for a place that's been abandoned for years. Lyra took the canteen, sitting down at the table. Yeah, could be worse. Silence stretched between them for a moment, then Argoz slumped into a chair across from her, rubbing a hand down her face. I don't know what to do. Lyra tilted her head. About what? Argoz gave her a flat look. About all of this. Draven, the gem, the fact that I'm apparently the key to some grand master plan for world domination. Lyra leaned back in her chair, shaking her head. Listen, I've been watching things here. Draven's fortress is a wreck. The Black Dawn's running low on resources. Guess what they need to make more of them? Argoz didn't answer. Lyra tapped the table. Your gem. Argoz swallowed. I didn't ask for this. Lyra smirked. No one ever does. Argoz slumped back in her chair. I just wanted to be left alone. Lyra's expression softened slightly. Yeah, well, that ship sailed the moment you stole the gem. Draven's never going to stop hunting you. Argoz exhaled, rubbing her temples. So what do we do? Lyra pulled out the Black Dawn rifle she had taken off a fallen soldier days ago, setting it on the table between them. We don't run. Argoz eyed the weapon. You think we hit the research facility? Lyra nodded. We hit it. Hard. We figure out what the hell they're doing and burn it down before they can make more of those freaks. Argoz let out a dry laugh. Yeah? Just the two of us? Lyra grinned. I've pulled off worse. Argoz shook her head, but there was something different in her expression now. The weight of defeat had lessened. Just a little. Lyra leaned forward. We're not done yet, and if the pack is coming back, I want them to find Draven's empire burning when they do. Argoz stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. Fine. but we need more supplies. More weapons. Lyra smirked. Then we better start stealing. Argoz pulled out a map, unrolling it on the ground. The parchment was old, worn but still legible. She traced a spot with her finger, eyes narrowing. "We're still a decent distance from the Northwatch fortress," she said. Lyra crouched beside her, gaze flicking over the map. Lyra grinned. "Sounds perfect." Lyra shrugged. "It's not every day you get to kick Draven in the teeth. Seems like a good opportunity." Argoz shook her head, muttering under her breath. Lyra tapped the map, smirk still in place. "So, what's the plan, Goblin?" Argoz dropped onto a worn fur mat in the corner of the cavern, rolling her shoulders with an exhausted grunt. Lyra remained crouched near the map, eyes flicking between the faded parchment and the dim entrance. "All right," Lyra muttered. "We've got supplies. We're out of immediate danger. Now what?" Argoz stretched out her legs, reaching for one of the ration packs she had stashed long ago. She tore it open with her teeth, tossing a dried meat strip into her mouth before responding. "We rest," she said through a mouthful of food. Lyra blinked. "Rest?" Argoz gave her a look. "You know, that thing people do when they haven't slept in who knows how long. Might have heard of it." Lyra snorted. "Cute." Argoz leaned back against the cavern wall, closing her eyes for a moment. "Look, we've been running for hours. We put enough distance between us and the patrols. Even if they were looking in this area, they wouldn't find this place unless they knew exactly where to search." She gestured toward the crates. "This safe house has been here longer than some of Draven's grunts have been alive. It's hidden, stocked, and far enough from the Black Dawn facility that we aren't sitting ducks. We're in the best position we've had since this all started." Lyra sat back on her heels, considering. Argoz had a point. They were safe, for now. That was an unfamiliar feeling. Lyra had been on edge for days, maybe even weeks. Ever since the portal explosion, it had been nothing but running, hiding, fighting, planning. Her body ached, her mind buzzed, her ribs still protested from the last brawl she'd been in. Rest wasn't a luxury. It was a necessity. She sighed, rubbing a hand over her face. "Fine, but only for a few hours. Then we start figuring out our next move." Argoz raised a lazy hand in agreement, already stretching out her limbs. Lyra rolled her shoulders before reaching for one of the ration packs. She opened it, took a bite, then immediately grimaced. Argoz cracked an eye open. "What?" Lyra chewed slowly, the dried food turning into tasteless dust in her mouth. "This tastes like absolute trash." Argoz let out a dry chuckle. "Yeah, well, beggars can't be choosers." Lyra gave her a deadpan look. "I feel like I deserve better than this." Argoz smirked, tossing another strip of dried meat at her. "You deserve a lot of things. This is what you get." Lyra huffed, leaning back against the wall, finally letting herself sink into the moment. For the first time in what felt like forever, there was no immediate danger. No gunfire, no shouting, no magic explosions ripping apart the air. Just silence, just breathing. Lyra didn't relax completely, she never did. But as she sat there, the faint crackle of the torchlight casting soft shadows against the stone, she allowed herself the rarest thing of all. A moment of peace. Gunnar sat alone in his office, the remnants of his collapsed table still scattered across the floor. 2 days. It had been 2 days since the attack and he hadn't stopped moving, hadn't let himself stop. The reports were the same no matter how many times he read them. Lives lost, defences strained, ammunition low. A victory on paper, but in reality, it was just a pause before the next fight. His cybernetic fingers tapped against the armrest of his chair, the quiet metallic clicks the only sound in the room. Then, a knock. He didn't answer. Didn't need to. The door opened anyway. Clara and Desara stepped inside, moving with the kind of efficiency that meant they weren't here for small talk. Clara Phelan, the female alpha of Echo Division, his second in command for the Elven detachment. She looked like she hadn't stopped working since the battle ended. her hair still pulled back in a tight braid, her posture rigid, exhaustion barely hidden behind her sharp hazel eyes. Desera, operations officer, sniper, always the professional, always prepared. She was already flipping through a datapad as she walked, ready to deliver her report with military precision. Neither woman commented on the destroyed table. Smart. Clara got straight to the point. 11 reinforcements are established, patrols set, security tightened around the portal and the perimeter. Desera followed up without missing a beat. Alfheim's artisans have arrived. They spent the last 24 hours setting up their workshop. They're officially operational as of this morning. Gunnar exhaled through his nose, nodding. Finally, some progress. Good, he said, voice rough from lack of sleep. What about Eli? Desera tapped the datapad. Worked overtime analysing the gear we recovered. She's got a full breakdown of the Black Dawn rifle, plus some other surprises. She'll want to brief you directly. Gunnar leaned forward, elbows on his knees. Surprises? Desera's lips pressed into a thin line. Not the kind you'll like. Of course not, because nothing was ever simple. Clara crossed her arms. She's waiting in the war room whenever you're ready. Gunnar let out a slow breath. He wasn't ready, but that didn't matter. He pushed himself to his feet, the chair groaning under the shift in weight. His cybernetic arm flexed instinctively, the metal shifting as his fingers curled into a fist. Let's go, he said. Clara and Desera stepped aside as he moved toward the door. Gunnar walked into the war room, his cybernetic fingers flexing absently as he took in the scene. The room was still in a state of recovery. Scorch marks marred the walls, the faint scent of burnt electronics still lingering in the air. Tables had been replaced, but the room's usual sharp efficiency had been disrupted. The attack had left its mark. At the center of the chaos stood Eli. Dressed in her usual blend of tactical gear and technomancer enhancements, she was completely in her element, barking orders at Homeland Security technicians while simultaneously reviewing data on multiple floating screens. Beside her, standing with silent, disciplined patience, was Alatheris, the lead elven artisan from Alfheim. Gunnar's gaze flicked between the two. Eli, a whirlwind of efficiency and sharp intellect. Alatheris, calm, methodical, carrying the quiet authority of a master craftsman. Desera muttered under her breath. They've been like this for hours. Clara let out a short breath. Figures. Eli barely glanced up as they entered, already flipping through a holographic display. Finally, you took long enough. Gunnar exhaled. Eli. She gestured toward the Homeland Security techs. They're rebuilding the war room's systems. I'm overseeing it because, let's be honest, you don't trust government techs not to bug the place. Gunnar grunted. She wasn't wrong. She swiped the screen aside, turning her full attention to him. More importantly, she continued, we have intel on the Black Dawn rifle and the gear we recovered. Alatheris inclined his head. It is troubling, he admitted, his voice carrying the quiet weight of experience. A fusion of magic and technology unlike anything I have seen. Gunnar crossed his arms. Go on. Eli nodded, gesturing toward the screens. Schematics appeared, glowing blue in the dim light. Let's start with the rifle, she said. It's not just enchanted, it's powered, runs off a modified crystal system, not unlike what the elves use in their weapons, except weaponized for sustained energy discharge. Alatheris frowned. A crude and volatile application of arcane engineering, Eli continued. It's the same principle as a wand, but turned into a sustained fire weapon. The crystal core allows the rifle to pierce armor and disrupt neurological functions. That's why Shade went down so hard when he was hit. It didn't just wound him, it disrupted his nervous system, locked up his muscles. Gunnar's eye narrowed. And the duration? Eli brought up another screen. We timed it. Roughly an hour before motor function starts returning. Desera let out a low whistle. That explains why the super troopers are such a problem. They're not just strong, they can disable us before we even land a hit. Gunnar exhaled slowly. That changed things. Alatharis stepped forward. That is not all. The construction of these weapons suggests that the Black Dawn has been experimenting with more than just Voidstone. They are actively trying to replicate Elven and Fey craftsmanship. Clora's expression darkened. Meaning? Alatharis's voice remained steady, but the weight of his words hung in the air. They are trying to build their own enchanted army. The room fell silent. Gunnar's jaw tightened. The Black Dawn wasn't just collecting magic. They were learning how to make their own. He turned back to Eli. Tell me you have something we can use. She grinned, wicked and sharp. Oh, I've got plenty. You want the good news or the bad news first? Gunnar exhaled sharply, his patience already worn thin, his eye locked onto Eli. Just give it to me. Eli smirked but didn't push her luck. She swiped a hand through the air, shifting the screens to display more schematics. All right, she said, let's start with the bad news. She gestured toward one of the displays. A holographic image of the Black Dawn rifle rotated slowly, pulsing with energy. These weapons? They're not one-offs. Gunnar's hands clenched into fists. Eli continued. The rifle we recovered was hand-modified, but the craftsmanship is advanced. Too advanced. That means they've been mass-producing these somewhere. An actual facility, not just one or two guys in a cave with a workbench. Alatharis nodded solemnly. If they have reached this level of refinement, it is safe to assume they have more. Many more. Clora muttered a curse under her breath. Desera exhaled sharply. So, we're about to be severely outgunned. Eli smirked grimly. That's not even the worst part. Gunnar's gaze snapped back to her. There's worse. She flicked her wrist, and the display changed, now showing biometric scans, magical energy readings, and what looked like a breakdown of the Black Dawn troopers themselves. This is what I found in the super troopers' blood. The room went silent. Gunnar's expression darkened. Eli nodded. Well, this is Voidstone 2.0. Alatharis's brow furrowed. You are saying they have improved it? Eli's expression turned grim. More than improved it, they stabilized it. The concentration in these soldiers is 50 times stronger than the first version we encountered. It's not breaking down. It's permanent. The realization hit like a hammer. Ravina's original drug had been powerful but flawed. It degraded. It could be purged. Not anymore. They aren't just enhanced, Eli continued. They're converted. Once they've been injected, there's no going back. No detox. No cure. They're permanent weapons. Alatharis's face was unreadable. This is monstrous. Gunnar exhaled slowly, his muscles coiled with barely restrained fury. Tell me you have something we can use, Eli. Eli finally grinned. That's where the good news comes in. She flicked her wrist and the display shifted again. This? She gestured at the screen. This is their mistake. The room leaned in. Eli's violet eyes gleamed as she spoke. They stabilized the drug, yeah, but in doing so they introduced a flaw. Gunnar arched a brow. Go on. They had to reinforce the body's ability to process the Voidstone infusion, Eli explained, meaning they made them dependent on it. Clora caught on first. They need a constant supply, Gunnar exhaled. So, we cut off the supply chain. Eli nodded. Exactly. If we find where they're manufacturing this stuff, we don't just hurt them, we cripple them. The room went silent again, but this time it was different. Before, it had been the weight of defeat. Now, it was the slow, steady hum of a plan forming. Gunnar straightened, his stance shifting from exhausted to determined. Then we find the source, he said, voice low, firm. And we burn it to the ground. Sophia stalked through the workshop, her stride purposeful, her expression unreadable. She had brushed past the elven sentries at the entrance without a word, ignoring the curious glances from the pack members moving around the facility. This was Gunner's domain, his territory. But today, she was here to take something from him. She reached his office door and didn't bother knocking. Instead, she twisted the handle, shoved it open, and stepped inside. Gunner sat behind a cheap fold-up table, his third one this week, after shattering the last two. Reports, maps, and a half-empty coffee cup littered the surface. He didn't look up, didn't acknowledge her. She stepped inside, closing the door, locking it. "We need to talk." Silence. Gunner reached for his coffee, took a slow sip, and set it back down with deliberate care. The fact that it was cold didn't matter. Finally, he leaned back in his chair, his cybernetic fingers flexing against the armrest. "Yeah, we do." She crossed the room, standing across from him, no barriers, no desk between them. "The President signed the order this morning," she said. "Echo Division is officially moving under my command at Homeland Security. It's done, Gunner. No debate." The tension in the room shifted. His cybernetic fingers curled into a slow, deliberate fist, the servos humming softly as metal met flesh. "You already signed it?" His voice was too calm. Sophia nodded. "I did." For a long moment he didn't move, didn't blink. Then, in one slow, measured movement, he leaned forward, planting both hands on the table. "Then let me tell you how this is going to go. Echo Division? Fine, take it, but you're not taking the pack." Sophia's nostrils flared, but she kept her voice steady. "You can't just separate yourself from this war, Gunner." He laughed, short and humorless. "This war came to my doorstep, and you're telling me to hand my people over to politicians? This isn't about control. It's about survival," Sophia snapped, stepping closer. "You've seen the reports. Military sites worldwide are being hit. We are under attack, and Echo Division is the only force that can fight this at scale. Then you better be damn sure you can win it without us." Her eyes flashed with frustration. "Gunner, this isn't a choice." "The hell it isn't," he fired back. His voice was sharp now, dangerous. "The pack is mine. The workshop is mine. We don't answer to anyone." Sophia exhaled sharply. She had expected pushback, but this was worse. "You think I'm doing this to control you?" she demanded. "This isn't about orders. This is about the fact that we are losing ground every damn day. The Black Dawn isn't just an Earth problem anymore. It's everywhere. We need reinforcements, we need intel, and we need Echo Division operating at full strength." Gunner's stare didn't waver. "And yet you still haven't found your mole." Silence. That hit hard. Sophia clenched her jaw. "We're closing in." "Closing in?" he scoffed. "That was the excuse last time too. Trinity was in your house for how long before you caught her? And now you want to pull Echo Division under you when you don't even know who the hell is feeding intel to our enemies?" That was a direct hit, and they both knew it. Sophia's nostrils flared, but she didn't deny it. "The difference now," she said evenly, "is that I'm not letting it happen again." Gunner held her gaze for a long moment. Then slowly he leaned back, exhaled, and gave the tiniest smirk. "Then let me make this real simple for you. You get Echo Division, the facility, the reinforcements, the funding, all of it." Sophia narrowed her eyes. "But the pack is mine." Sophia didn't answer immediately. She wasn't sure she liked where this was going. "We are done taking orders. The workshop is pack territory. No oversight, no chains, no bureaucratic bullshit. You need us, you ask. We are allies, not assets." Her jaw tightened. "And if I say no? Then you'll get your Echo Division, but you'll fight this war without us." Sophia inhaled deeply, calculating. She could fight this. She could push back harder. But she knew Gunner. She wasn't going to win by bulldozing him. "Fine," she said finally. Gunner didn't look satisfied. "One more thing," he said. "Reagan takes command of Echo Division." That caught her off guard. "You're picking my commander now?" No, Gunnar said. I'm making sure the job doesn't go to some homeland lapdog who has no idea what the hell they're walking into. I trust Reagan. You need someone who understands how we fight, who's been here since the start. Sophia considered it. Reagan is already high on my list. Then move her to the top. Another long silence. Then, finally, Sophia nodded. Done. Sophia exhaled and took a step back. Echo Division is mine. The pack is yours. The workshop is untouchable, no oversight, no interference. Gunnar gave a slow nod. But when I need the pack, Gunnar, I expect you to answer the call. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Gunnar's lips curled into something not quite a smile. I guess we'll see, won't we?